They're staying home because of the numbers. They're staying home because of the numbers. Yeah, I think they'll be back soon. All right, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to start this meeting. So calling the meeting to order for Monday, December 7th, 2020. Attendance at the beginning of the meeting, let me just quickly check. I've got Councillor Hanson, Councillor Mackay, Councillor Broadhead, and Councillor Jolly on, and there's Councillor Hughes on Zoom. And then Councillor Watkins and I in chambers. So that's 100%. I need a quick motion to adopt the agenda as presented. And there you go, Councillor Broadhead, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to have to call on Ray for everything. Go ahead. Who was it? Wes, go ahead. You're muted.
Yeah. Okay, move that the December 7th, 2020 agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Granicus isn't working, so we're just going to do the voting on the participants button. So all those in favor? You don't have to, Ray. Ray's got his hand up because he's not on Zoom. All right, that's, I'm assuming, unanimous? Okay. All right, we are going to skip ahead quickly because the public hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. So we are going to go to this. I'm going to declare the public hearing is open. Is there a presentation from administration on this one? Christine, is that you?
There is, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Council. Can you all see the presentation? Good. So this report is for the consideration of the repeal of an intermunicipal development plan, or IDP, between the City of St. Albert and Sturgeon County. The councils of both St. Albert and Sturgeon County accepted the IDP in 2001. However, Sturgeon County rescinded their approval of the IDP in 2010 and have not used the document since that time. St. Albert administration has been using the IDP as a guiding document since then. And while St. Albert keeps the IDP, all subsequent policies such as the MDP and area structure plans must align with the IDP. The current IDP is outdated and is not in use by Sturgeon County. Repealing this IDP will ensure that the new MDP flourish will not conflict. Otherwise, an amendment to the IDP may need to be considered, and this would affect the timeline of MDP flourish. Repealing the IDP does make possible a new IDP after annexation if desired. A letter was sent to Sturgeon County Council and to the Intermunicipal Affairs Committee in January of 2020, advising that St. Albert would be considering the repeal of this IDP. Sturgeon County replied with a letter of no concerns in February of 2020, which is included in your package in the previously distributed attachment. This map is just for information purposes. The blue hatching shows the extent of the IDP area, and the red shading is the current negotiated annexation boundary. So administration's recommendation is that bylaw 37/2020, being a bylaw to repeal bylaw 7/2001 that adopted an intermunicipal development plan between St. Albert and Sturgeon County, be given second reading, and that bylaw 37/2020 be read a third and final time.
All right. Thank you, Council. Any questions? Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, they said we got comments from Sturgeon in February of 2020. That was like 9 months ago. So they don't have any other comments or anything. There's no concerns that's arisen in the last 6 or 7 months.
No, there have been no other concerns given to us.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other member of council have a question? Lots of shaking heads here. All right, Cheryl, do we have any registered speakers for the public hearing? Seeing none. All right, no questions. I'm going to need a motion from council to close the public hearing. Go ahead, Sheena, thank you.
The public hearing be closed.
Public hearing on, okay,
You want me
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
37, yeah, okay, we're good. All right, call for the vote. Ray is putting his hand up, so he's a yes. And it looks like everyone else is. Thank you for that. All right, public hearing is closed. Can I have, Ray, do you want to move second reading? Thanks.
That bylaw 37-2020 being a bylaw to repeal bylaw 7-2001 to adopt an intermunicipal development plan between the city of St. Albert and Sturgeon County be read a second time.
Thank you for that. Any comments?
None, Madam Mayor.
Anyone else? All right, go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
Just for anybody who's watching at home, I think it's just so that people understand that while we're repealing the IDP, there's a full intention to create a new one with and Sturgeon County. And that the timing for this is so that it's compatible with the MDP, but there is in the annexation agreement an intention and actually a commitment to create a new one going forward. It just may not happen right away because of the election coming up, but this is a temporary lapse between IDPs. That's it.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Good points. Anything to close, Councillor Watkins? All right, call for the vote. Ray's got his hand up. All right, thank you. That's unanimous. And okay, it was. All right, third reading.
That bylaw 37-2020 be read a third time.
Anything else from anyone?
Nothing to
Okay.
add.
All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed, and that's unanimous. Awesome. Thanks for that, guys. Okay, we'll move back to the beginning of the agenda where we have presentations because we actually have a few. Cheryl, you had emailed me, or somebody had emailed me. I can't open up my email on my Surface. It's not working. But I think I've got the list scribbled on my notes. So if I get it wrong, let me know. But the first registered speaker was Becky McCaffrey and Shelley Tremotten from Victim Services. Is that their first? And they're participating via Zoom. I see Becky. And is Shelley with us? Is Shelley with you, Becky, or is she zooming?
Yes.
Oh, she's at the top. Okay, I see her. Okay, I have a lot of faces. I'm sorry, guys. All right, for all of the speakers who are registered today, the rules are that we have 5 minutes to present, so I'll turn on a little timer. Go ahead whenever you two are ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Herron and Council for allowing me to address your meeting today. I don't have a formal presentation. I really just wanted to take the time and the opportunity to thank you in person on behalf of the St. Albert Victim Services Association for the continued support and the program funds you provide. Because of those funds, we are able to provide the best services possible to victims of crime in St. Albert. Also, we continue to work collaboratively with our referral agency, the St. Albert Rcmp, and with our local community services agencies. The Support Council has given us contributes to improving the lives of those who are impacted by crime and trauma within the city of St. Albert. So on behalf of our board, staff, and volunteers, thank you so much.
Well, there you go. Thank you for that. That's actually always nice to have. Is there any questions for Shelley or Becky? Go ahead, Councillor Jolly.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to address us today. My question is about the recommended amount is quite a bit lower than the ask. So I'm just wondering what that means in terms of services that can be offered in 2021 if we kind of cut back as what was recommended.
Yeah, I believe that the funding that's been recommended for approval is the same as we got last year. And so I don't see that being a problem. We are well funded. We also get grants from the government of Alberta. I think it's more towards the format of the grant request where we have to provide all of our staffing salaries. And so that's basically what we did. We're thankful for the money that we are approved. And it is from the time I started in 2018, it is an increase already. We used to only get 50 and now we get 66.
That's great to hear. So that amount isn't going to make any difference to
No.
this. This is perfect. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
We also do fundraising, and so yeah, it all helps.
Any more questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, and thanks, Becky and Shelley, for coming today. I just want to ask this question like I always ask. Are you still looking for board members?
No, great news. We, in the last couple of months, have recruited 4 new board members. So that puts us at 8. We do have one whose term is ending, or she's resigning effective end of December, but then we still have 7. So thank you for asking, but we've had a successful recruitment period.
That's terrific. That's all good news. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
That actually is fantastic news. Any more questions? All right, I'll just finish off with a thank you to you both. Victim Services does fantastic work in the city of St. Albert, not just fantastic, but very necessary work in the city. So I think quite often, unless people have ever had to use your services, which hopefully they don't, but if you're kind of unknown. So anything the city can do, anything city council can do to promote your fundraising efforts and the good work you do, we are always here for you. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Okay, next on my speaker list is Cheryl Dumont representing St. Albert Further Education. Cheryl, are you with us? No, I don't think so. They were together. Yeah. Is Cheryl not with us? Okay, maybe I'll just come back to her in a minute and see if she signs on to Zoom. In the meantime, I'll come back. All right. Then I had Jen Cote. Is that next on my list, Cheryl? Okay. And she would like to speak to us about the law enforcement item on our agenda. So Jen, are you with us?
Hi, so can you hear me now?
We sure can. We can't see you. You don't have to turn on your camera, but if you want to, you can.
I'm kind of out and about right now, so I'll keep it off.
Okay, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing from me at this point, so I'll keep it short today. As I believe it's high time that every level of our government starts to provide fulsome answers and transparent information to constituents, especially with the increased asks of us surrounding never-ending social restrictions. At the October 19th council meeting, St. Albert's Director of Emergency Management, Mr. Janke, provided a face covering bylaw update to council members. Mr. Janke reported that between the August 4th implementation of the bylaw and September 15th, municipal enforcement officers had conducted 388 site visits related to the bylaw. If averaged out, this works out to 7 site visits per day for that period. Based on that information, it would appear local law enforcement is already highly engaged in COVID bylaw and health order enforcement. In the presentation Mr. Lafleur will be providing to council this afternoon regarding local enforcement of COVID-19 orders, he indicates municipal enforcement services and RCMP officers are still seeing instances of non-compliance with CMOH orders. I would like to cede the remainder of my 5 minutes to council in hopes that they can answer the following questions. Has council done any due diligence to verify Mr. Lafleur's statement is in fact the case? I ask because if you scan the environment around you, there seems to be very, very few people not complying with provincial health orders. And there is no information in Mr. Lafleur's report to this effect. Can council, perhaps through Mr. Lafleur, provide constituents with reports of non-compliance provided to him by RCMP and municipal enforcement services? After all, if it's being suggested that increasing the presence of law enforcement in an already very anxious and nervous population is a necessary step, we need to see evidence supporting why. Secondly, what does increased enforcement look like? Do you foresee RCMP and law enforcement officers in grocery stores and public spaces with meter sticks ensuring people maintain distance? Will law enforcement now be making house calls to ensure those inside are all residents of that household? I'm sure you can understand how the average citizen would find these measures insulting to their intelligence and their ability to follow public health orders. Lastly, will your proposed policy statement also encourage officers to possess a thorough understanding of face covering exemptions? Exemptions under CMOH Order 38/2020 include a person who, and I quote the order here, is unable to wear a face mask due to mental or physical concerns or limitations. So if council could answer those questions, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. First of all, you can come and present to council anytime. We don't get tired of it. It's always good to question our agenda items. A lot of the questions you've asked council cannot answer. And when we get to the agenda item, we will probably be asking very similar questions. I wrote them down about the understanding of the exemptions, et cetera, the number of incidents. I can tell you that I can't remember what we had an emergency advisory committee meeting last week. We just had one small sample. The attendants at the outdoor rinks were giving this head counts of the people on the rinks, and there was consistently more than 10, and we've been told by Alberta Health, the Deputy Minister, that 10 is the limit. So I understand that there's a delicate balance here between enforcement, education, and non-compliance. So hopefully you can listen in to when we get to that agenda item, because I know we'll have bylaw representation here, and we will have Mr. Lafleur here as well. So if you can wait, that's probably the best time to get your answers.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Barb Bowman, on two topics. She wants to talk about the enforcement and the mail-in ballots. Barb, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
We can't see you.
Okay.
You can turn on your camera if you want, if not.
I'm actually at work and in my office, so I'm gonna refrain from turning on my camera as well, if you don't mind. Thank you
Go
so
ahead
much.
whenever you're ready. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mayor Herron. I'm actually going to stick with what Miss Jen Cote actually asked. I'm not quite as prepared as she is, so I just wanted to call in about my concerns about the implementing the law enforcement as well. I just find that it's under the circumstances and the fact that we're all under a high anxiety and everyone's confused and we get conflicting information all the time, and there's differences between the provincial and the municipal. This kind of thing is actually, in my mind, creating quite a bit of anxiety. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm not in support of bringing in more law enforcement. I really do think and feel that the St. Albert citizens are doing the best they can, perhaps. In listening to you talk about the rinks and there being an excess of 10 people at a rink, I mean, I would support if it makes everybody feel better that someone is at the rink just maybe monitoring that specific thing, but to bring into effect peace officers now, doling out fines, which are fairly excessive. From what I've seen, $1,000 is pretty excessive, and not a lot of people can even handle that right now based on their incomes and losing job sources and all this kind of thing. So like I said, I'm not quite as prepared as I'd like to be, but I do want to let you know that I think that you should really consider that before you move forward with making that decision. I really feel like St. Albert citizens are doing the best they can. And in my experience walking around, I've seen very few people in non-compliance. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. And as I said, I'm going to stay online and listen to the questions that Jen Cote asked, and hopefully we can get some answers from that before we proceed. And as far as the mail-in ballot situation, I just found out about that. And obviously based on what's happening in the United States, we're seeing not such a great outcome from mail-in ballots. So also, if you could give us some information on what that would look like and what you're, planning on doing with that, I would appreciate that. And I'm going to just hand it back over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Yeah, I think you might want to stick online for the enforcement thing. I just want to be clear, we're not bringing in new enforcement officers. Our bylaw officers are already level 1 CPOs, community protective officers. And so with or without council's policy statement, they have the authority to give these enforcement measures now. And that was due to very recent change, ministerial order from the Solicitor General. So it's not council's decision what to and how to direct our officers to enforce. This is just support that to move a little bit from the education to the enforcement side. It's just our support of that. And then when we get to the mail-in ballots, I can quickly tell you that, we're not using the same kind of mail-in that they use in the States. Mr. LaFleur could probably explain it more when we get to the agenda item. We already allow for mail-in ballots in St. Albert if we so choose, and this would just expand who that availability went to. Okay. And is Lilo the last speaker we have? Oh, I didn't get those names. Okay, so Lilo Forsyth, is Lilo with us? Okay, can you put in the chat who else is there? Because I seriously can't open my email. Thanks. And I know if Luke comes in here and approaches my computer, my email will start working. Okay, I have Joyce S., resident, wants to speak regarding local enforcement. Joyce, are you with us?
Hi, yes, I am. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak. So I'm concerned that your proposal to implement local enforcement of COVID orders will create even more hatred and dissension within our community. My sister was brutally murdered in her apartment here in St. Albert. She was held down, tortured, and stabbed 36 times. Following her murder, I suffered from intense, reoccurring nightmares where I would dream about how powerless and helpless my sister must have felt at the hands of her assailant. When I tried to wear a mask, those intense feelings of powerlessness and helplessness became triggered. And because of that, my doctor issued me a mask exemption. Friday, when I was shopping at Superstore, a man approached me and asked me this question. He said, "Did you forget your mask, or are you just an idiot?" My daughter, who is 18 years old, also has a mask exemption because she has trouble breathing due to enlarged adenoids and tonsils. Yet because of her experience being bullied in school, it's too threatening for her to not wear a mask in public for fear of being attacked. And because of your mask bylaws, you have taken away her opportunity to earn income. It is emotionally and potentially physically unsafe for her to not wear a mask, and it is unhealthy for her, for she is in the public sector. Aside from the fact that COVID's recovery rate is near 100%, and most of us are already immune to COVID due to having had the common cold, and that the PCR test has been proven to generate up to 97% false positives. And masks do as much to stop a virus as a chain link fence does at stopping a handful of sand when thrown at it. The public perception is that I am a threat, and therefore it is justified that I be attacked in public. I'm sure that my daughter and I are not alone in our inability to wear a mask, yet I think it's fair to say that very few people actually have the courage, like I do, to go out in public without a mask for fear of being attacked. Personally, I will never comply with unconstitutional rules that are formed in flawed science. I will never comply with your masking bylaw ever, and I will never be afraid to go out in public. I refuse to let fear control me. Your proposal to crack down on COVID measures will create more hatred and dissension in the community, with the result of people like myself being punished for not wearing a mask. Is it not enough that my sister's life was taken from me, but now I have to be attacked because I can't wear a mask? Before you pass this motion, perhaps you all should take a week to go out in public without a mask and see exactly what it's like to be treated as an outcast, a leper, and unjustly attacked. And on one last note, I think it's important for you all to acknowledge that the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has filed, as of Friday, a lawsuit against the provincial government for its unconstitutional and unwarranted COVID measures. So before you continue to add more restrictions or enforce those restrictions, perhaps you should give that a thought, that these measures are already unconstitutional, unlawful, and unwarranted, given the true nature of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. When we get to this topic, I will ask our officers to kind of explain how they do approach enforcement of those exemptions, because I think that's important to hear for all of us. Is there any questions that a member of council has for Joyce? All right, Joyce, I hope you hang on till we get to that item. And now I have in the chat Brandy Dominelli to speak on the enforcement as well. Brandy, are you with us?
Hi, I'm here. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. I read through Mr. LaFleur's note about the local enforcement of COVID-19 orders. And then I went online and I discovered a bulletin from the Solicitor General's office to all peace officers, like the employers of peace officers. And it clearly outlined that as of November 24th, for a 90-day period, that peace officers are to enforce all provincial public health orders. So I was curious as to why the City of St. Albert would need to create a policy statement or spend any administrative effort on this, as it appeared it had already been done. So I called right before this call at about 12:30. I spoke with a woman at the front desk of Municipal Enforcement to ask her about whether they are already enforcing the public health orders. And she said that they are. They have been as of this weekend, as you all know probably. And she said that compliance has been excellent, except for at the city rinks. She said that the city rinks, as you said, Madame Heron, that there's been difficulties there. Now, since the city rinks are operated by the city, as a business owner, I would assume that if I had more people in my business than is allowed by the provincial health orders, that I would be eligible to receive a fine by municipal enforcement. I would assume that the bylaw officers would not be standing inside of my business issuing tickets to patrons who are coming in. So the thing I don't understand is it's the city's responsibility to maintain the rinks, yes, and to take care of the rinks and to promote the rinks. So the rinks are your responsibility. So now the bylaw officers are spending their time at the rinks, warning people and managing how many people are on the ice at any given time. So isn't that the responsibility of the City of St. Albert to provide staff to ensure that you are not breaching the provincial public health orders? So that's my one question. And so I don't understand the purpose of the policy statement, because wouldn't it just be, isn't the statement because the City of St. Albert is having a problem managing their facility? And the municipal enforcement officers have said that no public individuals are breaching, businesses are not breaching, they haven't, everyone's complying except for the city run facility. So could you please kind of explain how that works? Because I don't, if we're going to crack down on enforcement more, then wouldn't the ticket go to the City of St. Albert?
I'm going to try to answer that. I might get it wrong.
Okay.
And I'll get clarification when we get to the item. It's not the city's responsibility. If you go into a restaurant, the responsibility that you sit with only members of your household is on the patron, not on the restaurant owner. And so and we did have staff at our outdoor rinks, and they were, these could be 18-year-old kids or whatever. They were getting verbally abused. So when we get to the item, I'm going to actually ask Mr. Scoble what his reaction to that was and how we've dealt with the abuse of our staff when we get there. But I believe it's been very clear, and I'll get clarification when we get to the item, that the responsibility for following these health orders is on the individual.
Okay, so yeah, if we could clarify, because then in my business, I generally offer group classes, which I've canceled all of them. So then would it be if the people come in as a group and they want to sign up as a group and they are saying that they're comfortable being a group, I'm not in violation of the health order then?
I don't think you can offer that, right? You can't offer it. But I'm going to get clarification when we get there.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good fine line that I don't understand.
Thanks.
Is that, does anyone else have questions? Sorry. Okay, seeing none. Is that all the speakers? Because I looked and I didn't see Lilo or Cheryl DeMont. Okay. All right. Council, we're moving on to business arising. Everything that was brought up during presentations is on our agenda. So are we okay if we get to those items before we do business arising? Seeing that. Okay, consent agenda. Anyone want to move consent agenda? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Watkins.
That recommendations in the following agenda reports be approved. 6.1 special council meeting minutes of November 9th, 2020, committee of the whole meeting minutes of November 30th, 2020, and regular council meeting minutes of November 30th, 2020. 7.1 civic agency appointments. 7.2 CLSC Rec-FCSS program funding grants. 7.3 CLSC Rec- outside agency operating grant program C-CS-22 grant allocations.
Excellent. All right, call for the vote on that one. Everyone vote. All right, is that unanimous? Okay, that's carried unanimously. All right, minutes were on the agenda. Civic agency appointments were on the, was on consent, but I feel like I probably should read out our successful names and congratulate them. So bear with me, council, because as you know, this is a bit of a long list, but it was confidential, so now we can make it public. All right, so our appointments to the Arts Development Advisory Committee, Emily Baker, Craig Cameron, Paul Henley, Sandra Johnson, Rachel Jones, Lynn King, Dana Koroluk, Jody Swanson, and Gwen Wilkinson. Congratulations to all of those people. For our Community Service Advisory Committee, we have Lisa Haraba.
Raba.
Thank you. Audrey Johnson, Michael Johnson, Emma, my eyes are bad, sorry guys, Lafreniere. Councillor Jolly. With pronunciation.
Sorry, for which name?
For Emma. It's okay. It's okay. I just go to you because you're the one person on council.
No, I know Lisa. That's why.
Okay. And we have Heidi Taphorn. So those are our 5 members for the Community Service Advisory Committee. For our 1 member that we had opening for the COVID task force, we have Timothy Buckland. We had 2 openings for the Environmental Advisory Committee. We have Heidi Kosi and Bill Marsh. For the Internal Audit Steering Committee, we have Martin Phillips. For the Library Board, we have Colleen McClure, David Holkoff, and Julie Steffner. For the Policing Committee, Chris Wells, Jim Rasso, Ian Sanderson, and Paul Specht. For the Seniors Advisory Committee, we have Randall Black, Diane Ellis, Donna Sawchuk, Dual Vanderwell, and then Randy Wolstenholme. We have 8 wonderful youth that are going to get appointed to our Youth Advisory Committee. Declan Kainga and his brother Ryan, Kyle Ferguson, Chris Hajek, Jillian Janke, Kennedy Love, Studi Mankotia, and Mari Waldron. Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, Michael Kirk, Greg Ligren, and Sheila McDonald. And then for our Assessment Review Board, Perry Moskaluk, Glenn Snellgrove, Blair Taphorn, and Kirby Yakubchuk. And then we actually have some current appointments to the Assessment Review Board, Randy Mann, Elena Scaluti, Mitch, I'm so bad at this today, Solchuk, and Normand Thurin. So that you will all receive letters with your appointments. I really thank each and every one of you for putting your time forward and look forward to working with all of you in the next year. All right, Councillor Jolly, these next two recommendations are coming out of the Community Living Committee. Would you like to read them into the record?
I can. Could that get popped into the chat? Sorry, I'm already at the next item because we passed on.
No, I can absolutely do it. It's no big deal.
Sure, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so on consent, we also approved recommendations for the FCSS funding. So to the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Edmonton and Area Society, $64,229.14. The St. Albert Stop Abuse and Family Society, $41,000. Sorry, this is for youth counseling, $41,000, and for safe education, $19,000. The St. Albert Seniors Association, $73,138.40. The St. Albert and District Further Education Association for the Newcomer Connection Program, $23,870. For the Out Loud Foundation for LGBTQ Community Supports and Services, this is for their outreach, $76,000. St. Albert Family Resource Center for Family Life Education, $160,157. St. Albert Community Village and Food Bank for their income tax program, $1,534.36, and for their community liaison, $73,153. All right, and on consent, we also did the outside agencies. We gave, so this was coming out of the Community Living Committee. St. Albert Bereavement Fellowship, $7,668. St. Albert Housing Society, $44,650. The St. Albert Seniors Association, $219,285. For St. Albert Victim Services Association, $66,402. For the St. Albert Community Village and Food Bank, $107,982,000. For Stop Abuse in Families, $42,800. For Mitchell Cultural Connections Company, $9,615. For St. Albert and District Further Education Association, $23,474. St. Albert Family Resource Center, $45,174. And for the Visual Arts Studio Association of St. Albert, $27,685,000. So congratulations to everyone, and thank you for the good work you are all doing in this community, especially in these trying times. All right, we're on agenda 8.1, which is the local enforcement of COVID orders issued by the Chief Medical Officer of Health of the province. Mr. Lafleur, do you have a presentation for us?
I don't have a PowerPoint, if that's what you mean, but I do have a couple of comments to make to hopefully clarify a couple of points, some of which were raised by some of the speakers earlier in this meeting.
Okay, go ahead.
So very simply, on the 27th of November, the Solicitor General issued what we call a ministerial order that directs, that empowers all community peace officers throughout the province to enforce the orders of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Now, enforcement, I'm not going to dwell on that. You have other people on the call today who can talk about that. There's basically, as I think we all of council knows, there's generally speaking, sort of what we call soft enforcement, hard enforcement. The soft enforcement involves a lot of education, persuading people, giving them an opportunity to come into compliance right then and there if they're caught contravening. Hard enforcement means quite simply issuing a ticket. And yes, as people have noted earlier today, when it comes to tickets that you have to pay a fine for, there's no discretion. The fine is $1,000. It could be more in an egregious case. A community peace officer could not issue a ticket. They could use a different way of enforcing. I won't get into the details of that, but simply, to put it simply, without putting a specified fine amount on the person, you can go to court, and judges are given the discretion to fine a person up to $100,000. Would that ever happen? I doubt it. But, just to let you know that enforcement of these sorts of things, if it comes to actually what we call hard enforcement, there are some serious penalties that are involved here. Now, why the government has done that, I don't want to speak for the Premier. I think we all heard his press conference on the 24th, and we've all watched the numbers. They're going up alarmingly. And the government of Alberta has basically signaled to all of the municipalities that if you're willing to help us, we're more than happy to accept the help of your community peace officers. They're not forcing it. They're giving that as an opportunity. So then getting back to the purpose of the resolution today, councils everywhere, politicians everywhere, do not get involved in the details of a particular case, right? That's just not appropriate. But what you can do, and what administration is suggesting you do, and in fact recommending that you do, is set the policy tone. Indicate that as a council, you are okay with these orders being enforced, and leaving it obviously to the discretion of individual peace officers out there what's the right way to go in any particular case. But you're letting them know that you support them enforcing these orders. Up until just over a week ago, they didn't have that legal ability. Now they have the ability, and what administration is asking you to do is go one step further and saying, yes, you have the ability, you also have our support, which is important. You're the council. You set the tone in this community. People listen to you, and that's why we're recommending it. I want to just take a moment to talk about what these orders may involve. We've had a couple of speakers that have focused in on mandatory masks. Yes, there is one aspect of one of the orders that talks about masks and mandatory masks, but does give, I will, again, without getting into detail unless you want to ask me, there's a lot of exceptions to that. And the definition of a mask is fairly fluid in the provincial order. Certainly similar to what the bylaw in St. Albert now does. It would certainly include a face covering, so it wouldn't have to be a mask that fits closely to the skin. In that respect, the provincial order would be no different than what our bylaw now says. But there are other aspects of the orders. And I'm not talking just about the orders that were issued in the last couple of weeks. People have been focusing on them because they're new. But there's an order that was issued months ago, which is still in effect, which says you've got to keep 6 feet distance from others. You have to do that, mask or no mask. And that order is still in effect, and could potentially be enforced if it's being flagrantly contravened by somebody. Some of the newer orders talk about gatherings. That's the key. I mean, apart from masks, the most important, as far as I can see, the most significant things about the newer orders are who gets to gather, how many people, where can you gather, what kinds of private social gatherings you can have. And there's also a whole list of things that are directed to businesses. What kind of businesses can stay open, which ones can be open for takeout only, which ones can allow customers into their premises. And here I just want to take a moment to answer one question that came up in the public presentations. Whose responsibility is it? Well, it entirely depends on how an order is drafted. So the orders that talk about, that talk about the requirement to, only gather in certain maximum numbers, or where you can do it, private or public places, those orders are all very clearly directed to the individuals, very clearly, not to any particular group or government or municipality. They're individual responsibility orders. The ones that are talking about businesses, in many cases, the orders, the way they're drafted, clearly put the onus on the business owner. So the answer to the question really is it depends on what order you're talking about, whose onus it is, who has the responsibility of complying. They're not all the same. And our community peace officers obviously, would have to be well aware of who is supposed to apply, who they would write a ticket to, or who they would talk to and try to persuade. It really does depend on which order it is. So apart from that, I guess I would just sum up by saying that what the environmental advisory committees clearly what their expectation was and what administration has brought forward today is a recommendation that council indicate that as a matter of policy, as a matter of setting the tone for what we expect of the public in St. Albert, we're going to support enforcement of orders that come from the provincial government in ways that make sense in every individual case without trying to tell the officers how to do their job. We would never recommend you do that because that's just, it's a slippery slope you don't want to start sliding down. And it's also too hard, right? Because there are too many, every case is different. What we are asking you to do is lend your support to St. Albert sort of getting behind the provincial orders and saying it's time to enforce. So that's all I have to say unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. LaFleur. And I see that we have Percy online. We have Aaron here. I don't know if we have Pam from the Rcmp, but so I'm assuming it's okay, Mr. LaFleur, if we ask questions of any of the three of you?
Oh, absolutely. No, you're in charge.
All right, one of the questions was brought up, and I'm going to turn this one to Aaron about the evidence of increased non-compliance. How are we tracking this, and how do you let council and the public know of incidents?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. So we do track the number of patrols that the officers are doing, and we create internal reports on those numbers. And I'll give you an example. So when the mask bylaw was introduced in August to date, so it's from August 1st to November 30th, we've recorded that there's been about 1,260 patrols that have been completed by the officers. And of those patrols, about 460 educational opportunities or warnings have been provided in relation to those. So there are violations that are occurring. I think a lot of those are improperly wearing of masks, and we track when we document what's an educational opportunity. It's not always clear that there's a violation, but there's an opportunity to have a conversation about a particular, someone not wearing a mask and educating about the bylaw, and then we document it that way. I can say that this weekend as well, I'll give you some statistics on some of the numbers. There was almost 70 patrols that were done over the weekend by our community peace officers. We had 8 complaints come in regarding the orders. Most of the complaints, 5 of them, I would say out of those 8 were related to the rinks, about overcapacity in those rinks. And on a couple of those occasions, they were over capacity. So we saw, 23 people when should have been 10. So then we record those as violations as well. Over the weekend, we recorded, 48 violations or warnings. But you have to remember, on one of those instances, there was almost 13, technical warnings because we had 13 people that were over the 10 capacity, right? So you got to look at those numbers and understand the context of where they're coming from. But there are violations that are occurring in those areas. But we haven't had a lot of reports or observations of the other violations right now around the gathering. So whether it's birthday parties that are occurring in someone's home, or other events or other businesses that are operating when they shouldn't be, we haven't seen that yet. But when they do come in, we will be tracking and watching that.
All right. Craig, a couple more for you, Mr. Giesbert. I would agree with some of the speakers, and you've sort of summed it up. We generally have very high compliance in St. Albert. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, and some of the presenters said the same thing. But they did ask a couple of questions, and I think you've explained it to the Emergency Advisory Committee, but you might want to explain it to everyone here, is how are you struggling with the difference between provincial orders and municipal bylaws? Because there are some misalignments there.
Yeah, so specifically in relation to the mask face coverings that are required. So we've done this in other in other areas where when you have two pieces of legislation that sometimes contradict each other or aren't exactly in alignment, generally speaking, we take the more restrictive one and we enforce the more restrictive one, or the more restrictive provision, because the officers will have an option. They'll come across a situation where there's a face covering violation or matter that they've looked at, and they're gonna have to make a decision if that particular incident contradicts the legislation contradicts each other. They're gonna have to make a decision on which one to go with, and generally speaking, it's the more restrictive.
Okay, thank you. And one final question before I go to council. The question one of the presenters was, do Rcmp and municipal enforcement have a thorough understanding of exemptions? I don't need to ask you if you have a thorough understanding, because I'm sure you do. I'm just wondering how we approach the conversation when somebody claims an exemption.
Yeah, so when as far as the thorough understanding goes, I also think it's important to note that a lot of the orders that are coming out are also, fast and furious, and there's a lot of detail on them too, right? And there's a lot of information in there that may take a couple of days for the officers to be able to review and get used to and understand, just like any piece of legislation. So sometimes there's a little bit of a learning curve on when that stuff comes out, and then the ability to educate the public. Now, when an officer, I think regarding face coverings and exemptions around face coverings, generally speaking, the orders that are in place are similar to the bylaw, so the officers are well versed in that. And when they come across a situation where somebody says and asserts that they are exempt, that's pretty much where the conversation ends from there. The officer they're not looking at pursuing and getting, any kind of written evidence that they're exempt or any kind of certification. However, if for whatever reason, based on that conversation, the officer does not believe the person and feels that a ticket is appropriate, they still can give that ticket. And then that onus of proving that someone is exempt ends up going into the court system away from there. But we haven't come across one of those situations yet.
All right. Council, I'm going to open it up to you guys. I've got maybe a question for Mr. Scoble, but I'll let you guys, I'll go first because I've asked a lot. Any further? Go ahead, Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Mayor. In regards to the fact that our mandatory mask bylaw allows for face shields, and now the province has come out with these new restrictions around masking in public places. We do know that they don't recognize face shields as being an appropriate face covering. Are we finding any difficulty with those two situations? I don't know who that goes to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take the first crack, Aaron, then you can answer. It's important to recognize that the province clearly does not recommend face shields. They clearly don't. But when they've written their order, they have not said that in their order. The definition of a mask in the provincial order that just came out last week is broad enough that it would include a face shield. So it's at the level of a recommendation right now. If you look at what is the law on the provincial order, I can wear a face shield, and if I'm ticketed for not wearing a mask because I'm wearing a face shield, I will guarantee you I will beat that ticket because face shield is within the definition now. But that you've also raised another very interesting issue. Again, sorry, Aaron, I'll let you in a second. That's right now. As Aaron has very correctly pointed out, these orders are coming fast and furious. In fact, some of the orders that came out the last week or two amended ones that came out 2 or 3 days before that, or repealed a section of them. So things are changing fast. It could very well change. all we can tell you is the way it is right now, which is why we're saying we're recommending that, you give our officers the opportunity to roll with the flow, as it were, and enforce whatever comes out. Aaron?
Actually, nothing to add. That was going to be my point as well, is that the CMHO orders are broad enough right now that they do include face shields. So there's no discrepancy between our law and the orders.
And yet they are very particular about saying they do not recommend them. So it is interesting that we're trying to navigate through whatever the space covering is, and yet and they've made it clear to us that they don't like our bylaw with that in place, but we also heard that it's better than nothing. So thanks for your insight into that. I have no plans to change anything, but I just wanted to know if that had actually come up with the new orders.
All right, I think I saw Councillor Jolly's hand pop up.
Yeah, thank you. Just really briefly, I understand there's no discrepancy with a definition of mask between our bylaw and the CMOH order. Are there other differences that might be confusing to residents? I know we kind of heard that all the different messaging is confusing. So are there any kind of clear differences between our bylaw and the order?
I think the age exemption is one that's very different.
Yeah, that's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the age is the biggest one. Other than that, there's nothing that stands out. It's probably something, if you're interested in, we might be able to do something internal and send a memo up to council as to a lot of what those key differences are. But the age one is definitely a difference.
Okay, so that's the bylaw is under 10 exempted and the health order is under 2 is exempted. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
We also exempt people who are on a stage doing a musical or theatrical performance, but of course that kind of has changed now too, because those are shut down by other provincial order right now. So that's kind of a distinction without a difference right now. Of course, that could change too. So, and apart from that, there are a couple of other exemptions that are similar in substance. Because they were drafted by different lawyers at different times, the wording is a little bit different, but nothing that I've looked at and they would say, well, that would make a significant difference for enforcement. So they're really broadly similar. They really are.
Thank you for that. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was interesting on occasion, and I know we have all received emails to this effect, is that there's still some opinion within the community at large that COVID is a hoax, the use of masks is unwarranted, masks don't work. And yet we live in an environment where we answer to higher orders of government and they're telling us to do certain things, and we respect the information that they provide. I'm not going to repeat the rant of the Manitoba Premier, but my question to administration is, when I went onto the website, sort of the supportive documents as to why we believe that masks work, I didn't find it so easy. And then when we had a presentation by a doctor from the Edmonton region, he provided some information to us. I was wondering if we could take what was public out of that and put it on the website just to give counterbalancing information out there to perhaps what some people may be reading. Just comment on that.
Well, I can comment on that. Yeah, I mean, we can upload some stuff. I mean, we've been given some stuff that's from the province, and it's publicly available information, but so you could find it on the province's site if you so chose to search for it, but we can certainly put it on our site if that helps people finding information. But the information we use is published by the province, and quite simply, the City of St. Albert does not have medical professionals on staff, so we do not interpret or analyze or synthesize criticize or critique or review or whatever you want to call it. We follow what medical professionals in the province of Alberta are telling us that work for the Ministry of Health and Alberta Health Services.
Yeah, I appreciate that wholeheartedly, for sure. I just, the more opportunity to direct people to direct them to our website, even if it forwards on to other sites. Because like I say, I'm not alone. I've received those emails and I know that the rest of council as well. So anyway, just a comment.
Any more council questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So if this wasn't passed, then what would that mean? Like the MEC officers are currently doing education. They're currently going around. I understand they can't enforce. So if this motion wasn't passed, what would it look like then? I'm looking to you, Dr. Lefleur, but I don't know who. I don't know. Let's just say that we said noted this motion. I realize it's a long shot, but what would it look like then?
I think probably Aaron or perhaps even Kevin would be the better. I can tell you legally the answer. The answer is that the peace officers would still have the authority to do it. Whether they would have the desire to do it, I can't answer that. That's for others on this call to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what I could add is if this did not pass, then what we might do is look to come back to council to see whether or not council supports that service delivery, because that's really what we're talking about. Is it's a council option on if they want the community peace officers providing that enforcement service on Public Health Act orders to the community. So if that wasn't a desire, then it would be important for us to be aware of that, and then energies would be focused in other areas.
So I feel like that's boxing me in, because there's a difference between going over and doing education and issuing a $1,000 fine for people who don't have any money to begin with right now because they're out of work. So if we didn't pass this, the MEC officers would just stop doing anything. If people called and complained, or if they had concerns, they would just stop.
Well, I think the important thing is to understand is it wouldn't really be a purview of council to say whether or not an officer should or should not issue a ticket or do enforcement or not. That's what I think, Mr. Lafleur was talking about at the beginning of this is the balance of overall direction, but understanding that the officers have an oath and they have they're required by law to enforce legislation that is under their appointments. So if council didn't want us to do any kind of that enforcement, and enforcement is not just about tickets, enforcement is also education, then that's important for the officers to know. But to delineate between only giving education or only giving tickets or one or the other becomes a little bit more of a challenge if this is not supported.
Yes, I would add to that, the administration would not get involved if an MES officer chose to issue a violation tag either. No different than we do not get involved if the MES officers choose to issue violations under the Traffic Act or whatever or other provincial legislation. So.
Okay, I'm just trying to think, like before today, if this didn't come forward as a motion, if this was not even up for discussion, the MEC officers have the ability and the jurisdiction to be able to enforce orders, right? If this doesn't come forward, like as of Saturday, they could do that. So then this motion is in some ways redundant. And I'm trying to figure out, so if we said no to it, it doesn't mean anything different than from what happened on Saturday, because you didn't require this permission to do it on Saturday. So I'm just trying to come to terms with this.
I think I would suggest that this is a policy decision by council today, and administration has brought this forward following discussion with the Emergency Management Advisory Committee last week. So, I think you're asking us to provide opinion on policy, which administration really is not to. We've brought this forward following the EAC meeting last week.
So I'm just trying to come to an idea, though, that if we didn't have a policy statement, would it really stop MEC from doing anything that they felt was necessary to do because they've been given orders from the province to have that jurisdiction? So I'm trying to figure out the necessity of this policy statement because I feel like it's a default yes, and you're doing an explicit no, whereas before, if we hadn't even had this discussion, they'd be able to do it. So why do we need this policy statement is what I'm trying to figure out.
David, can you help out with this? Maybe your discussion that you had at the EAC last week?
I can. I guess, again, I appreciate what Mr. Scoble's saying, and I'm not going to do what he has declined to do, which is to give you advice on policy. I would just reference, if I may, I think there's one passage in the administrative report that states that what councils do at the local level is they set the tone. They set the tone. And they, by their policy statements, they basically send a signal to the community, to the residents of the community, that here are our expectations, of how we're going to, as a community, react to this pandemic situation that, we're all in through no fault of ourselves. We didn't ask for it, but here we are. What are we going to do? So that's really, I think that was the thrust of the discussion. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. The members of the committee can say if they agree or not. That was the thrust of it. Everybody understands that peace officers now have the discretion under the provincial order to do this. What this motion would do is signal that, you know what, we're behind you. As a council, we support this, and we want to encourage the community to comply with these orders because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, so Mr. Keysbrook, let's say that there's 12 people in an ice rink. How do you manage that? Because do all 12 get fined? How do you determine who the last two were, or how would that be managed under these orders?
It's not easy. And I'm not going to be able to give you a very definitive answer on that because it really is case by case when the officer attends a location, looking at all of the circumstances to understand what's going on and what's happening. So in a case where there may be an organized, premeditated hockey game that was organized and it was over the capacity, that may end up with a different outcome versus a number of people who attend on their own and then just happen to be over the capacity. So it's dependent on the situation that the officer will review and make a determination as to if a violation is required. 9 times out of 10, I would say that most people are that I've seen so far and heard even over this last weekend have been complying and respectful of the officer's direction. So when they say, hey, there's too many people on the ice, let's keep the numbers down to 10, they're complying before they leave. If they come across a situation where somebody is being defiant and not complying, and that education or that warning that provided wasn't going to change that person's behavior in the future, that officer may decide on that for that individual, that a ticket may decide to get issued there. So very circumstantial, depending on what's going on.
Because this is my major concern, is that I watched Australia go into a police state for months. And there was a concern that with the winter coming and flu and cold season and having it just spread, period, that these measures be taken in Canada. And in spite of the province claiming otherwise, it seems that we are in a very tight lockdown where you basically aren't going to be able to socialize with anybody for God knows how long. I wish it was 8 days. I don't believe it will be. And now we're looking at asking councils to basically endorse a police state where we're encouraging the same type of ramifications as we saw happen for months in Australia, in spite of the fact that we have high compliance. And so that is where I'm having such a disconnect right now. Sorry. I don't see the reassurance that that's not what's happening today. So tell me that that's not what's happening, because that's what it looks like today. No other questions.
We'll come back to that, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Mackay, I'm sorry if I didn't see your hand go up. I did see it in the participants area, so go ahead, and then Councillor Hanson after that.
No problem, Madam Mayor. Just a quick follow-up, couple questions in relation for clarification with Mr. Griesbeck. And I recognize doing law enforcement for 40 years nearly, I don't envy some of the circumstances that you're being forced or being placed into, because I mean, these are difficult times. And really all I see this as doing is providing another tool in the toolbox for our members to utilize. And we have to also recognize we have the Rcmp, and I mean, it's like Mr. Scoble's already identified. You're not going to tell them I'm a member of the St. Albert Rcmp or the MES that are able to write a summons under any number of different provincial provincial statutes that they can't, because that's not a separation of our role in governance and what is a police role, and that is not a police state. Anyways, I just want to go back and confirm with Mr. Griesbeck in relation to doing this. Mostly we're doing some proactive patrols around particularly hotspots, which would be the outdoor rinks. And if we see infractions, we encourage, we educate, and we're getting great compliance. And if you could confirm that. And then secondly, we're not going to be kicking in doors of homes, and we're not going to be kicking in doors of businesses. This is just something along the lines, again, if we get a complaint, we will respond. And in that response, we may be, again, take the opportunity to educate, learn a little bit more about what's the reason for the maybe the number of people being out of compliance, or people that maybe not being in the home. But we're certainly going to seek information. We're not going to be out there issuing summonses just because we can. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor. That's the approach that the officers have been taking, and that's the general philosophy. I think, you know, the threshold of when a ticket gets issued is typically repeat offenses, where the initial education or initial warning didn't set in, and we're having challenges with compliance, or in a case where the officer really feels that the education or the warning isn't going to provide that deterrent from compliance in the future. So in that case, a ticket has been issued, and that's what's happened in the 2 tickets that have been issued for the face coverings bylaw to date, is that those officers didn't feel that the warnings would have that deterrent in the future, so they issued them. So you're absolutely correct in the way that you summed it up.
All right, thank you. That just I'm just trying to provide assurances to people that this is really, I mean, answer this question, Aaron, if you can. I mean, so far out of all of the proactive involvements we've had with your members have had with the community, I mean, what percentage of them are less than people being compliant, or people being aggressive? What are we finding?
So not finding a lot of aggression towards the officers. There's been a few, statements that get made when the officers do approach people, but it's very rare. Some of the numbers I gave at the beginning. So we have almost 1,300 patrols that have been done on the face coverings bylaw. And out of those, only 2 tickets have been issued. There's been approximately 400 conversations with people, providing an education or some type of warning. But those have been relatively positive and well received. So we're not seeing a lot of negativity on that front.
And our bylaw, which can be enforced by the Rcmp and also by our MES law officers as it currently is written, contains a harassment section and also a penalty section in relation to harassment. Should a member of our community or a member visiting our community feel that they have been approached aggressively or feel threatened, they can also contact police and or MES, and that matter could be dealt with or investigated?
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
the RCMP would handle anything under the criminal code to deal with threats and harassment. And then our officers would deal with it on the more minor allegations that would be there under the bylaw.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it was a softball question, but I wanted to toss one in there. The other point, Mr. Scobel, I'm a member of the Emergency Advisory Committee, and I apologize, Madam Mayor, if you were going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it while I got the floor. There was a number of concerns in relation to our staff working at outdoor rinks in relation to some inappropriate behavior, not only on behalf of some of the users, but also on some of the people who are maybe watching some of the people on our skating rinks. That you at that time expressed a great deal of concern for the health and well-being of your employees. And has that resulted in any decisions made by you in relation to what's happening now?
Well, yes. I mean, we looked at different scenarios. Unfortunately, the boarded rinks that are staffed, the single operators there were subjected to quite a bit of abuse. So we looked at different scenarios from having 2 staff at each rink, which turned out to be cost prohibitive with the boarded and non-boarded. We were looking at about $15,000 a day in extra costs. So what we've done is rolled those rink operators that are normally at the boarded rinks. They're part of a roving crew now. So there's 2 to 3 employees on these roving crews, and they show up and do the ice maintenance and all that. But we're they're not able to count numbers and that. We're leaving that to MES. And unfortunately, we're not able to leave the skate shacks open anymore either, with the staff not there. So we have brought in porta potties instead for emergency use.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, it's a very difficult situation when we put our staff in this. I mean, and that's why I appreciate what the purpose of the report is. I mean, and we probably, this is just basically around identifying and informing not only ourselves but the community of some of the issues faced with this. So I appreciate all the responses. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I give up the floor.
All right, Councillor Hanson, and then Councillor Hughes.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, Aaron, that my neighbor came home Saturday from the Deer Ridge ice rink and was very appreciative of the education and the way it was handled, because it was just overrun with kids who just really wanted to play hockey and skate. But we have new restrictions and something had to be done. And so it's difficult on everybody, but he appreciated the tone and the education from officers.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hanson. I think that is echoed by all of us, Aaron. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I just had one more question. So let's say someone's having an emotional breakdown and they call their friend and their friend says they're coming over to help them for coffee. And then their neighbor is one of those people that spends most of their time on their windows staring out to see if anyone's violating anything. And they call MEC. So what happens then? Because the MEC officer has the ability to go into the homes. And there's a situation where there's 2 people who would be they're not under a business arrangement. How would that be handled?
Councillor Hughes, thank you for the question. So without getting into too much speculation on what an officer would do, I think the way that I could answer that question is they wouldn't immediately dismiss the complaint at the dispatch level. So they would take the information, send it to an officer, and that officer would likely go and knock on the door, unless they had a phone number of the person to have a conversation to understand what's going on. And then they would make a judgment call at that time as to whether or not there is a violation, number one. So is there an exemption for having another person in your household for that particular reason? If the friend is a counselor, I'm not sure. We have to look at all those intricacies of the exemptions. But that information they would seek to understand and look at what are the totality of the circumstances and then make a call afterwards as to whether or not there would be, hey, don't do that again, or hey, please understand that these are the rules, or here's a ticket. So any one of those outcomes could come out of a situation like that after they review it and investigate it.
Would they come into the home or would they talk outside? Do we know? Because they have the right. People are so scared to do anything now already before this motion gets passed in 4 minutes.
So Councillor Hughes, I can, as far as going into a home, that's pretty rare for a municipal enforcement officer or a community peace officer to actually go into somebody's home. Normal circumstances, when you start entering a private dwelling, on a violation, if consent isn't provided, there's, you start getting into warrants and getting the courts to issue warrants. So typically, a lot of these kinds of cases that we're talking about is from the door. But again, I'm also can't say that, in every circumstance is the exact same. So if there is a very serious violation that is occurring in someone's home, and there is a need for law enforcement to enter that private dwelling, they may seek to get a warrant to do that, or the Rcmp would look at it through a different lens potentially and get passed on to them.
Thank you. That's it.
Great. Any more questions? Go ahead, Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, so the government has given you authority to write these tickets. So what's the difference if we support this or not? If somebody calls up and says, I got a complaint about somebody who's not wearing a mask, is the difference that if we don't support this, you will go over there and you won't write them a ticket? And if we do support this, you'll go over there and you will write them a ticket? It doesn't seem that simple to me.
Well, I'll start that. So I think, again, we've kind of talked about that a couple times. It's the officer's discretion. This is, as Mr. Lafleur stated, this is a policy statement by council, and that's what's up for debate tonight. And it's really setting the tone. So that's, I think each situation, as Aaron has said and given numerous examples when asked, is going to be at individual officer's discretion, whether council passes this or not. This is a policy statement from council. Again, the tone from the top.
But you don't need a policy statement from us to write a ticket as it sits now if somebody makes a complaint. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, thanks.
All right. One last question I have, and it's for you, Mr. Lafleur. It has come up in the past and again today about infringement of our Charter of Rights. Can you help me understand how, following provincial health orders about staying 6 feet apart or not sitting at a table with someone outside your household, or not following a municipal bylaw with regards to masks is an infringement of your Charter of Rights, when I can see other bylaws such as seat belts, et cetera, that are not an infringement of Charter of Rights. So can you help us understand the Charter?
Yeah, how long have you got?
Like the whole thing. I got all night. This is
No.
No, you've explained to me this to me in the past, and you've done a good job, and it doesn't take very long.
Yeah, I hope I can do that. As I'm reminded of who was it? King Henry VIII said to all of his wives, "I won't keep you long." So sorry about that. I see Councillor Mackay appreciated that at least. So all kidding aside, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada guarantees a certain number of fundamental rights. The ones that come into play mostly in this kind of situation is your right to freedom of assembly, right? To freely congregate and talk to each other. And that's a guaranteed charter right. However, there is something in the charter, and we as lawyers know of it as Section 1, that says that every single right in the charter is subject to such reasonable limitations prescribed by law as may be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Now, if that sounds like legal mumbo jumbo, fortunately, the courts have told us here's what it means. It means that if you're going to infringe someone's charter rights as a level of government, you can do that, but you've got to show that there's a compelling public interest to do it, and that you're taking only such steps as are reasonably necessary. That's called the Proportionality Test. Basically, what you're trying to do has a rational connection with the bad thing that you're trying to prevent. And so nobody's rights are absolute in this country. There are rights, but governments have the right to override them, if you will, as long as you do it by law in a prescribed. So that's why a press conference from the premier doesn't cut it. That's why you keep hearing me say, I got to see the orders. I got to see the orders. That's why. You've got to see the actual orders, because that's what makes it prescribed by law. And then if there's a rational connection between what's being done, for example, is it rational to say that, restricting gatherings to no more than 10 people will have a positive impact on mitigating or slowing the spread of the virus? I'm not a doctor, but as Kevin has said, the people who are medical experts have said yes. So therefore, there is a connection, and therefore, although it may be a technical charter violation, it's not a charter violation that you can't do, because it meets all of these tests that have been well defined in, Supreme Court of Canada decisions up to 30 years ago. Oak's case, Big M, Motors, etc. So that's the basic idea is that, and to take it further to the other things you've mentioned, if you look around you, there are many, many ways in which our basic rights are restricted by government action. But what do they all have in common? They all have in common that there's a rational connection between what the government is doing and the overall public good. No one would, I don't think, argue that we should be allowed to drive vehicles without insurance. There's a very good reason why everyone who wants to drive a vehicle must be insured. That's a restriction on your rights, but we all accept it as a rational one that has some connection with what otherwise would be a bad thing that would happen. So I hope that answers your question. A Charter of Rights is important, and I have no doubt that different organizations around the country have filed lawsuits to try to challenge different mask bylaws and other measures, orders in different provinces. I will be very interested to see what the courts do. I can tell you that there's strong arguments along the lines that I've just made why, although there may be a technical violation of rights in some cases, they're justified because of the greater public good, and the measures taken have a rational connection and are not so overbroad that they're all out of proportion. There's a rational connection and a rational balancing of the interests here. Does that help?
Yeah, you do a good job of explaining that. Thank you. All right, I'm seeing no more hands up. So I'm actually going to go to either Councillor Mackay or Councillor Jolly, because this came out of the Emergency Advisory Committee. Councillor Jolly, do you want to put the motion on the floor?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
That in cooperation with the efforts of the Government of Alberta to reduce community spread of the COVID-19 virus, Council hereby expresses its support for St. Albert's Community Peace Officers, CPOs, to enforce COVID-19 related orders of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, the CMOH, by all available means, including issuing a violation ticket where a CPO considers that to be an appropriate enforcement response to an incident of non-compliance.
Thank you for that. I accept the motion. Do you have any opening comments?
Very briefly, I want to thank Aaron and his team for being on the ground in the last 9 months, trying to respond to the various health orders and changes to their authority. So thank you so much for that. And quite simply, I have your back. So thank you. That's all I have.
Go ahead, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As difficult as this is, I'm going to support this as well. Says two things. One, it says to our enforcement officers and our police officers and to administration that, yeah, we support them in the task that's before them, no matter how difficult. We support them in exercising their discretion in all matters. But the other important thing that I think it says is it says to our citizens in our community that those that they've elected to lead the community are serious about dealing with the issues that face our community. And as hard as it is, and as much as we don't want to be there, we support the provincial government in the actions that they are taking to help suppress the spread of COVID-19. And as hard as that is, sometimes hard things need to be done. So I'm confident that Aaron and your group will exercise great wisdom going forward, and I'm not afraid of this. So thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I don't think I'm going to be supporting it. The policy isn't necessary for the MEC officers to do their job. And they could do it whether this ever being brought forward. And my concerns, regardless of how much lipstick you want to put on this, about encouraging a police state remain. So in my opinion, we can let MEC do their job as they would with any other enforcement without having to create a policy statement to tell them to do what they would do anyway. And without trying to set a signal that we should be living in constant fear, not of the virus as much as about what the next measure will be taken by the government of the day. So people have been told for 9 months to be afraid of the virus. They don't need to be concerned about getting that message across. The compliance in St. Albert has been extraordinarily high. But now the fear has shifted, in my opinion, from whether or not you're compliant, because most people are, to whether or not the government will take away more freedoms. I'm not just talking about St. Albert, I'm talking about the provincial level. That is what everybody spends each day wondering, is which freedoms will be taken and which ones will be brought back and when. So I feel that this isn't a necessary policy. I feel staff have enough to do without having to create a bunch of paperwork, and that MEC can do this without having this be explicitly stated. So that everything that's been done to date for the past 9 months from governments has been to encourage fear, as opposed to encourage how to handle and live with the virus. It has been how to be afraid of everyone around them. And this will be another measure that will be done to encourage that, unfortunately. That's it.
Any other members of council? All right, I'm going to wrap it up and I'll turn it back over to you, Councillor Jolly. I think, honestly, this is about doing our part in the fight against the virus. And so it's partly that, and it's partly about supporting our municipal enforcement officers. We have one in chambers today. And so that honestly signals to me that this is important to them, that we have their back. You know, it's a policy statement, not a policy. So there's no paperwork that's going to come out of this. This is about 7 members who have been elected to council having the back of our municipal enforcement. I would echo what I think everyone has said and everyone witnesses daily. St. Albert has very good compliance, like amazingly good compliance. And, you know, and when we don't have compliance, quite often it's a misunderstanding of what the rules are, because as we've heard today, they change frequently. So, you know, when we run into non-compliance, I bet you a tiny bit of education is all that is needed to achieve compliance. This is about those that know the rules and don't want to follow them. And even that, I get that there's fatigue and it's setting in heavily after many, many months of this virus. And we're tired of the restrictions. And I do see behavior starting to slip because of that. So from a leadership perspective, this vote is in front of us. And we need to, as leaders of this community, back up what the government of Alberta has already stated is the rules. We just need to enforce them. So we're not talking about taking away freedoms. We're just talking about enforcing, the, you know, these are temporary orders until the virus is under control. But I don't see how we cannot support this today. Councillor Jolly, to close.
Thank you. And Mayor Herron, for me, this is not so much about enforcement. We're already enforcing this. for me, it's just about reminding people that, you know what, it's hard, but we have to keep going for the safety of our community. This weekend, I texted my mom and I said, well, it's nice out this weekend and it won't be for the rest of the year. So do you want to do Christmas dinner this weekend? And so we did Christmas dinner, sitting in front of my mom's house, not eating anything, and drinking our own Starbucks coffees. And at one point, my mom wanted to show one of my daughters. She's like, can I just take her inside just for a minute to show her this puzzle I'm making? And my family has a very dry sense of humor. So I didn't respond to her. All I did is I turned to my my stepdad and I said, this is how people get COVID. And we laughed. And I think people need those reminders that it's hard, it's weird, but we have to keep it up. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed. Oh, is that finger a yes? Okay. It's carried 6-1 with Councillor Hughes opposed. Thank you. Moving on, we have nothing on the agenda for emergent items. There was nothing for information. There's one council motion. I think Councillor Hughes, you're deputy mayor right now. So I'll pass the chair over to you.
Okay, thank you. If you wanted to read your motion into the record.
Sure, that the City of St. Albert second the Town of Okotoks 2021 Alberta Urban Municipality Association resolution advocating provincial establishment of a regulation under the Local Authorities Election Act to enable special ballot provisions for any eligible elector for use in the 2021 civic election.
So before I accept that, are there any questions? I don't see Councillor Watkins, so if you have anything, just pipe up. I don't have his screen. I just have the distant one. But no questions? Okay. All right. Well, then I'll accept your motion and go ahead and debate.
All right. I'll make this quick. I think you're all aware how AUMA works their resolutions. We have one municipality make it. They require a seconder. Call went out to all the mid-sized mayors from Okotoks. I said that we would be happy to do it hopefully if we have support today. We have been seconding a lot of resolutions lately for other municipalities. Not sure exactly when this will come in front of AUMA. I've talked a little bit at the board table because the next opportunity would be Leaders Caucus in March, which might be a little bit too late. So we're going to potentially do it a little bit earlier. So this is really just about one more thing to fight COVID. And if we still are worried about the virus next fall, which hopefully we're not, but if we are, the opportunity to ask for a mail-in ballot, if your municipality has approved them, would be offered not just to those who are not physically present on election day, but they would be open to any elector for whatever reason. So it's just a simple thing to ask the province to make that change.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything? Councillor Jolly.
Thanks. I'll just add really quickly. I voted by mail when I was living overseas. It's not a big deal, really easy. And I was thankful that I had the opportunity to vote. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay, well, I'll speak up. I'm not going to be supporting this because I'm watching the mess that's happening in the United States with all the various mail-ins and all of the concerns that are happening. And I just don't think that's a rat's nest that we need to get into. So if people can shop, they can vote. If they can do anything at all, they can vote if they so choose to. So I'm watching that mess unfold right now with unverified ballots, people being voted more than once, like all sorts of things, people claiming that someone else voted for them and coming in on the day of. I realize it might be a different system, but it's also just a hornet's nest that I just don't think is necessary, even at an advocacy level. So I personally won't be supporting it. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? Okay, Councillor, or Mayor Herron to close.
I would also just add, and Mr. Lafleur put in the backgrounder, that we would hope that the province would allow us to open the ballots ahead of time so we can have results on election day. We don't want to have to wait for the results, but honestly, we should be calling them special ballots. That's what we call them here, not mail-in ballots. It's probably bad timing, but I do not see what's happening in the States as a problem. I've heard numerous times from the people running those elections that they've been the safest elections of all time. It's rhetoric that's being pushed out, and we already offer them, and we offer them safely. So I think this is completely manageable.
Okay, we'll call for the vote. And I don't have Councillor Watkins, or you might have it, I don't know. Looks like it's closed. If the votes are closed, then it looks like it was 6-1. Is that correct? I'm just looking for something else.
Yeah, 6-1.
Okay, great. I'm the one who is opposed, and I will pass the chair back to you, Mayor Herron.
All right. Any information requests, notice of motions or announcements? See nothing. I'm going to move on. No presentations or business arising. We do have 2 in-camera items. I'm going to ask for a motion to go in camera. From Councillor Mackay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, being as I missed my usual one, I'll hit one anyways. That council moving camera to discuss a matter pursuant to section 24(1)(a) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. I'll leave the rest.
All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed, and that's unanimous, I'm going to guess. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We have actually been at this for a couple hours. We'll take a 10-minute break. Actually, I will get control of the host and do a breakout room and etc. So come back at 3:50.